Hey designers, this is Kristen from Cut File Classroom, where I share tips and tutorials for designing SVG cut files for Cricut, Silhouette, and other cutting machines. In this video, I'm going to show how to create stacked text designs in Adobe Illustrator, and I'm going to show how to create 3 different versions. In the first version, all of the text has a solid fill color, and the stacked text is a straight cut across where each word overlaps. In the second version, the center word has a solid fill color, and the stacked text has outlines with no fill color. And in the last version, where the stacked text overlaps, follows the shape of the actual letters. The cool thing about all of these versions is that once you set up the stacked text effect, you can still come back and edit the text. So you can set it up once and then create lots of different designs from the same setup. If you want to follow along, I've included the links to the fonts I'm using in the description below. I'll also include a link to download the Illustrator practice file, which includes these finished designs as well as the live effects used to create them, so you can see each step of how the designs come together. So I'm going to start out by selecting everything here and deleting it from my artboard so I have a nice clean space to work with. And then I'm going to press T on my keyboard to bring up the type tool, and I'm just going to click and type the text that I want to use. I'm going to bring that to the middle here, and I'm going to give it a fill color. Because in this first version, all of the cuts for the stacked text are a straight line, we're actually going to use the rectangle tool to create that straight cut. So I'm pressing M on my keyboard to bring up the rectangle tool, and I'm just going to grab a light gray color, and I'll press Shift D on my keyboard, which lets me draw this new rectangle and have it be placed behind the text. Now I need to make sure that the text is perfectly center aligned within this rectangle so that I have even spacing above and below. So I'm going to select the text and the rectangle and come over to the Align panel. But if I click this horizontal align center, it does this crazy thing where the text jumps up. And that's because Illustrator by default is aligning the baseline of this text to the rectangle. To fix that, we're going to come over here to the side of the Align panel, and we're going to choose Align to Glyph Bounds and click Point Text. Now, when we click Horizontal Center Align, it's going to align the text within the shape based on the height of the actual letters. So that looks perfect, and I'm just going to go ahead and align that vertically as well. And then I'm going to right-click and group that so it stays together. So now I'm going to create a copy of this and place it right up here. So as I click and drag, I'm going to press Alt and Shift to make a copy directly above it. Then I'm going to come over to the tool panel and grab the Blend tool. And I'm going to click on the first copy of text and then the second copy, and that's going to create additional copies in between. Now if I want to tweak this number, I can come over and double click on the Blend tool, and mine is already set to specified steps. And then I'm just going to bump up the number of copies to 3, and when I toggle the preview, I can see how this is going to look. I'm happy with the way this looks, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So now I'm looking at the stacked text, and I can see there's some parts of the text that would be very skinny to work with if I was cutting this with a cutting machine. So this little part, bottom part of the E here, that looks a little too skinny. So I can adjust that in this live blend by using the spine. The spine is this straight line that we can see here in the middle of the blend. It's not actually part of the design, but it's something that Illustrator uses to create the blend and control the blend. So if I want to adjust the height of this blend, I can click on the top point and press Shift as I drag it down, and that's going to tweak, I did a little too far there, and that's just going to tweak the distance of this blend here. So now I can see I've gotten rid of that little sliver of the E, and I think that looks much better. So once you have your stacked text looking the way that you want it, now we can copy this to create the bottom stacked text. So I'm just going to click to select this whole thing, and I'm going to press Alt and Shift as I drag straight down. And what I want to do is try to line up this copy with the original text here. And I'm going to press Command or Control Y on my keyboard to switch to outline mode, and now it'll make it a little bit easier for me to align this center text. So basically you want the center text to be right in the middle, and then the two copies to be evenly spaced above and below. And then I'm going to press Command or Control Y to bring back my regular view again. And I'm selecting this bottom blend, and now I can come to Object in the top menu, Blend, Reverse, Front and Back. And that's going to bring this center text to the front so that the rest of the text is stacked below it. Once again, I can use the spine of the blend to adjust how these bottom layers are stacked. So once you get your blend the way that you like it, you can go ahead and start to convert everything into actual vector shapes, because that's what we need for cut files. Right now, this is all live text. It's a blend, which is considered an appearance. So we can't use this file as is in a cutting machine. But we do want to save this live version of it because we can always come back to this and edit the text to make new designs. So I'm going to press Alt as I click and drag, and I'm just going to save this copy of my live blend over to the side. And then I'm going to select my blend here. And I'm actually going to group this together, pressing Command or Control G on my keyboard, so that this is all a single group, which just makes things a little bit easier to work with without affecting the other things that are on my workspace. So I'm just going to double click on this group to isolate this group and work with just this text. So now I'm going to select the full design, and then I'll come up to the Type menu and select Create Outlines. And that's going to convert all of my text into outlines. Now we need to convert the blend into vector shapes. So I'm going to select everything and then come up to Object, Blend, Expand. And that's going to expand the blend and convert it so that everything here is its own vector shape. And then the last thing we're going to do is come over to the Pathfinder panel, and we're going to click Trim. And that's going to basically, it's kind of like what you see is what you get. So it's going to trim everything out exactly as shown. Now I'm going to press Y on my keyboard to bring up the magic wand tool, which you can also find over here in the toolbar. And I'm going to double click and make sure the tolerance is set to 1 and the fill color is checked. And then I'm going to click on one of these gray rectangles here, and that's going to select all of the gray rectangles using that same fill color. So now I can just press Delete on my keyboard to get rid of all of those selected pieces. So now here I have my stacked text design, and I can come in here if I want and change this center color. And then I'm going to press Command or Control 8 on my keyboard to make this a compound path. And then I can press the Y key and I can grab my magic wand tool again and select all of this red text. And I can press Command or Control 8 again to make all of this a compound path. And then I can just select everything and choose Simplify to make sure that we're really getting these anchor points as cleaned up as possible. This was a pretty straightforward font, so there's not a whole lot of cleaning up to do here, but I always like to do that just to make sure my files are clean. So all the steps that we just did to convert everything to vectors was while we had this group isolated to make sure that none of the other shapes in our workspace were affected. And now our first stacked text design is done. Now for the second stacked text effect, I'm going to use this blend that we already created. So I'm going to press Alt as I drag to make a copy of it here on my artboard. And remember, for this version, the text in the center is solid, has a solid fill color, while the stacked text above and below is outlined. So for this, I'm just going to click to select the bottom blend, and I'm going to hold Shift as I drag it down. So that's going to create an opening for the text in the center. And then I'm just going to use my group selection tool, and I'm going to select one of these text and rectangles, and I'm going to copy, and I'm going to paste it in front, and I'm just going to slide it up in the center here so that this is going to be my new center text. And I'm just going to give it a different color fill just so we can differentiate it a little bit easier. So now I can go into these blends, and if I want to make this the same, this has 4 stacked copies and this now has 5 because we moved it down. So I'm going to come over to blend and double click, and I'm just going to bump this down to 2 and click OK. And then I'm going to click that spine point and hold shift as I drag it in, and I'm just going to make sure I get that to a place where I think it looks good. And then I can see these little bits of the T and E are going to be sliced in a weird way, so I'm just going to select this whole thing and bump it up as well. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the top. I'm going to double click on the blend tool, bump the steps down to 2, and then click on the spine point and hold shift as I drag it in. And I see that little bit of the E is still a problem, so I'm just going to drag it in a little bit more until that's gone. And now I think that looks better. So now I'm ready to convert the stacked text from having a solid fill color to having outlines. So I'm going to select everything and use Command or Control G to make this whole thing a group. And then I'm going to double click to isolate this group. And then I'm going to use the direct selection tool, or you can use the group selection tool as well. And I'm just going to click on the baseline text of the blends. You can switch over to the outline mode if that helps you find them a little bit easier. But once I have those texts selected, I can press Shift X on my keyboard to swap the fill and the stroke, so that instead of these having a solid fill color, now they have a stroke outline instead. Next, I'm just going to bump up the weight of this stroke to about 4 point, and I think that looks good. But now that I've done that, now we can see these little slivers here in the tops of the T's on the bottom, and then at the bottoms of the A and the E. So we need to just tweak our blend a bit to get rid of those. I'm going to bring this down a bit. Just bring this point up a bit. So once we've solved all those little issues and made sure that everything is going to cut nice and clean, now we're ready to expand all of this into vector shapes. So I'm going to get out of that isolated group, and I'm just going to select this and make a copy over to the side, because again, I can use this to create other designs that have this outline stacked text. So now I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to double click to isolate and just work within this group so I can convert everything here into vector shapes. I'll come up to Select, Object, All Text Objects, and it's going to select all of the text objects within this isolated group, and I'm going to press Command-Shift-O on my keyboard, and that's going to convert this text into outlines. So now the center text is vector shapes with a solid fill, but then the stacked text is stroked paths. So I need to expand these into vector shapes as well. I can't leave them as paths. So while they're selected, I'm going to come up to Object, Path, Outline Stroke, and that's going to outline those paths so that they're now vector shapes. So now that we have all of our text expanded, we can go ahead and expand the blends as well. So I'll select the bottom blend and the top blend, and I can come up to Object, Blend, Expand, and then now we're ready to trim everything. So I'll highlight everything and come to Pathfinder, Trim, and now I can press the Y key to bring up the Magic Wand tool and click on one of these gray rectangles, and it selected everything that's gray, and I can just click Delete. Now I can select my center text and press Command or Control 8 on my keyboard to make that a compound path. And then before we make any of this stacked text into a compound path, we have some letters that overlap each other, so we need to unite these first to make them into a single shape. So I'm going to come over to Pathfinder and click Unite. So now we see those have been combined into a single shape, and now I can press Command or Control 8 to make those a compound path, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the top letters. I'm going to click Unite, and then Command or Control 8 to make those a compound path, and now I can just select everything and group it. So now we have our second stacked text design. And now for the last version, I'm going to start from scratch again because this effect uses a different method. We're not using a rectangle to create a straight cut across our letters. We're going to be using an offset to create curves around each letters. So I'm going to press T on my keyboard to bring up the text tool, and I'm going to type in the word that I want to use, and let me find a better font than this. Okay. And I'll link to all the fonts below the video. Shrink it down a bit. All right. Let me just slide these out of the way a bit. So once I have the text that I want to use, I'm going to head over to the Appearance panel. And I'm actually going to pull this out here so we can see what I'm doing. And if you don't have the Appearance panel on your screen, you can come up to Window and choose it here from the menu. Okay, so now with my word selected, I'm going to click on this icon here that says Add New Fill. And then here within the Appearance panel, I see a fill box. And if I click on the arrow, it gives me a mini swatches panel. And it's an exact copy of the swatches panel over here. But I'm going to choose a fill color from here to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this peach color. And that's going to be my fill. Now I'm going to create an offset, but first I need to create another fill. So I'm going to click this Add New Fill Color button again, and now I see a second fill has appeared underneath, and this is the one I'm going to use to create my offset. So I'm going to change this color to the light gray color that I like to use for my offsets. And then with this bottom fill still selected, I'm going to click this FX button here to add a new effect, and I'm going to choose Path, Offset Path, and that's going to create an offset. I'm going to change the joins to round, and I'm just going to decrease this to just be 0.1 inches. And I think, toggle my preview, I think that looks good. So I'm going to click OK. So now from here, we're going to do pretty much the same thing that we did for our other stacked text, is we're going to make a blend. So I have this text selected, and I'm going to press Alt and Shift as I click and drag to make a copy of this up here. And then I'm going to come to the Blend tool in the toolbar and click once on the first copy and then once on the second copy, and that's going to create all these blends in the middle. And then I want this bottom copy to be in the front, so I'm just going to double click on that and press Control or Command front bracket key to bring that to the front. So now I want to take a look at my stacked text and just make sure there aren't any little bits that would be hard to work with when we cut this from our cutting machine. And if there's anything I want to change, I can just use the top point of this spine and hold Shift as I click and drag to tweak how the stacked text looks. Oops. And if that happens, if you lose a copy while you're tweaking your blend, it just means you need to adjust your blend settings. So I'm going to come and double click on the blend tool to bring up the blend options. And then I'm going to change this to specified steps. And then I'm going to tweak the number of copies to 3 and check my preview and click OK. All right, so now I can get back to tweaking the spacing here and just make sure that it's not going to give me anything that's too thin or hard to cut. Okay, I think that looks good. So now I can copy this blend to make the bottom copy. And again, I'm going to try to line the center text up so that we have even spacing between the top and the bottom with the center text. So I think that looks good. So I'm going to switch back to my normal view. And then again, I'm just going to come up to Object, Blend, Reverse Front to Back. And that's going to bring this copy of the text to the front so that everything else is stacked below it. So now I see these little bits of the A that are going to get cut weirdly. So I'm going to find my spine again, and if you have trouble finding it, you can press Command or Control Y to switch to outline mode. So you can find your spine and then switch back to regular view so you can see how your changes are going to look. And once you get it the way you want it, now you're ready to convert everything into vectors. So let me put this back over here. So I'm just going to make a copy of this over to the side because I always want to preserve my live text and my live effects so I can come back to them later if I need to. And now I can select this and I'm going to Command or Control G to group it. And then I'm going to double click to isolate the group. And the first thing I'm going to do is select all of the text. So I'm going to come up to Select Object, All Text Objects, and that's going to select all of the text objects, but only within this isolated group. So I've got all my text selected and I'm going to click Type, Create Outlines. And now it's all been turned into outlines. And then next I need to expand the offset as well, because remember we created the offset around our text using the appearance panel. So it's not a vector shape yet, it's still an appearance. So we're going to come up to Object, Expand Appearance. So now we can see that our offsets have become their own vector shapes. And there's a whole lot of extra nodes in here. So I'm going to right click and choose Simplify so we can get that cleaned up and we can see what a big difference that makes. And I'm going to click OK. And now finally we can expand our blends. So I'm going to select both blends, choose Object, Blend, Expand. So now each layer of the stack is its own vector shape. And then I'm going to come over to Pathfinder and choose Trim. So that cuts everything exactly the way that we see it. And then I'm going to press Y on my keyboard to bring up the magic wand tool and click on one of those gray offsets so that they all get selected, and then hit delete. So that trimmed everything the way that I need it. So I'm just going to select the center text and give it a different color. Now I can press Command or Control 8 on my keyboard and make that a compound path. And then I can press Y on my keyboard to select all the other colors and Command or Control 8 on my keyboard to make them compound paths as well. And then I can select the whole thing and just see if we can simplify this any further. And it looks like it did clean up some more. So that looks good. And I'm going to click OK. And now that third version is done. Now you can also create the outlined stacked text using this method as well. If you want your letters to have the curved offset when they're cut, it's totally up to you. And now we have our 3 stacked text designs. And the last thing I wanted to show you is just how quickly and easily we can edit these texts to create new designs. So I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of this live version here to show you. And then I'm going to double click to isolate it because we only want to work with this group. And let me zoom in a bit. And then I'm going to come up to Edit, Find and Replace. And I'm going to type in, just like if you've ever used Microsoft Word or Google Docs or any kind of word processor, you can find and replace text. So I typed in the word that I have, and then I typed in the word that I want to replace it with. And I'm going to click Find. And it's going to find that word just within this isolated group. So then if I want to replace all instances of that word within this group, I'll click Replace All. And we can see it replaced all 5 versions of that word within this group. And I'll click Done. So now I just created a whole new design without having to start over and make the whole stacked effect from scratch. And then I can go ahead and convert this into vectors and make it into a cut file. And then I can always come back to the live version that I have saved over on the side and keep making new designs with different words. You know, just generate lots of different designs that way. And it works the same way with the curved design as well. So let's say this is Mama. First, let me make it a group. The whole design has to be a group. And then you can double click to isolate that group. And then you can choose Edit, Find and Replace. And now I'm going to say Find Mama and replace with Grandma. So Find and then Replace All. And now it changed all of the text to say Grandma. And then I can click Done. And since this is a live blend, we can come in here and play around with some of the spacing here to get it looking the way we want it before we convert it to vectors to make a cut file. But you can see how quickly we can generate different versions of this design. We can change it to Nana, Mommy, Sister, Aunt, whatever other versions you want to create, and you can do it pretty quickly without starting over from scratch. So that's it. We've created our 3 different versions of stacked text designs, and these are all ready to save as SVGs and upload to your cutting software. Plus, we also have the live versions over to the side that we can come back to and change the text to create even more new designs without starting over from scratch. If you'd like to learn more about designing SVG files for cutting machines, head over to cutfileclassroom.com and download my free designer's guide to error-free SVGs. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe, and if you have any questions or suggestions for new videos that you want to see, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I'll see you next time.